Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about collaborative approaches to game marketing. So, collaboration can transform the way indie game developers approach marketing and commercialization. So, in this episode, we're going to dive into how shared resources, collective networks, and creative hubs empower indie studios to amplify their efforts and stand out in a competitive market. So, that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey, everybody, and we're back. And today with us, I have a good friend of mine, Kevin Chancey. Kevin, how is it going? And thanks for finally being on the show, bud.
What's up, Andrew? Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it is great. And, for those of you who don't know Kevin, he is the general manager of Purple is Royale. And you guys do a lot of cool, exciting things, part of which is why we're even here today. But first, Kevin, please introduce yourself. Tell us, what is Purple is Royale? What do you do there? And what are some other cool things that kind of Purple is Royale is involved with as well, too?
First of all, I just want to call you out and say I love that you made it your own. Purple is Royale. Some people call it Purple is Royal. Now I know that there's two new meanings to the company name, and I'm very happy about that.
It's funny that you said that because I never use the word like Royale. I like never.
That one's
It's
unique to you, though. I love it, and
apparently. I
to like never stop calling it that. Like it needs to be that
oh
every
my!
time now.
Now that you said that, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I said that. Anyways, usually I say Royal. Wow, you're right though. I said Royale. Okay, it's official. At any rate.
Purple's Royale is the game we're working on right now. Is the new game jam for the Indie Asylum. Yeah, no, Purple's Royal is the marketing arm of the Indie Asylum. The Indie Asylum is where I work. It's an incubator slash kind of ecosystem cooperative space for indie studios. I've been in the Indie Asylum since I want to say 2018. I think that's it, 2018. And I basically came in as someone just offering help for trailer work. That was my background at school. My brother has his own company. It's called Manavoid Entertainment. Essentially, he kind of asked me if I wanted to join in because he needed trailer work at that moment. I said yes, and I kind of never looked back since. So yeah, it turned into this big marketing beast, and here we are.
Sweet. And I mean, in terms of your involvement there, there's lots of stuff that you guys are involved, like, Purple is Royal in general, but like, I mean, everything from like PR, like anything, marketing, advertising, ads. I mean, you name it, you guys basically do it. I mean, like you said, you guys are the marketing branch of the Indian Asylum. And it's like there's so much that you get involved with, and not just from that, but other things that like that ecosystem you talked about too. The India Asylum, there's lots that you're involved with too, right?
Yeah, I mean, our philosophy is kind of like, by no means are we the absolute experts on all this, but we want to learn everything and we want to learn how to do it ourselves, so that eventually we can have the expertise to do it ourselves. So it kind of started with that notion of like, okay, well, how does everyone else do it? And you look at it from, AAA perspective, publisher perspective, other indies, how they activate those campaigns, how they structure it. And yeah, it's been a wild ride because we failed a lot. We've done a lot of good things too, a lot of really cool successes. But yeah, I couldn't think of another place where I'd have the kind of green light to experiment and learn on your own and fail on your own and kind of learn from those things, other than the India Asylum. That place, it allows us to do it, and I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, definitely. And failure, success, it's all learning, regardless of what happens. So, I love your take on that and everything else. So yeah, lots of good stuff. And you know what? In a moment, folks, we're going to kind of dive in a little bit more about the whole concept of Indie Asylum. That's probably why we're not even we're mentioning it, but we're not going to talk about it that much because it's really the focus, not necessarily Indie Asylum as a whole. I'm sure Kevin, you're going to have lots of examples that relate to that, but otherwise, that's what we're here to talk about. Collaboration. But first, thanks for sharing a little bit more about yourself, what you do, and Purpose Royale. But before we move on to the conversation here, I have some questions here that allow us to get to know you a little bit more. And for those of you who aren't familiar, this is the Q Box round, folks, where I just have a few random questions for Kevin. So, Kevin, are you ready for the Q Box round?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Excellent. So the first one is, what's the most helpful or impactful advice you have ever received?
I want to just like set up the table. You send us a sheet to like fill in with some notes just so that we can kind of work off of that in case anybody didn't know. That's the magic of it all. But that this one box, I think I wrote like 10 different quotes, and not from like books or TV shows, whatever, just like actual things that I've been through in the last 7 years. But I think the one that stuck with me the most, especially that my significant other, my girlfriend right now, she's a nurse. And so this quote, "You're not saving lives," it helps me kind of understand the context of the industry, my involvement in the industry, and kind of like the weight of my decisions. Like basically we're talking about, success, failure, learning from it either way. But at the end of the day, I'm not saving lives. And so if I do make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Ideally, you don't make those mistakes, frequently. And ideally it's a kind of a learning phase every time. But you're not saving lives. It shouldn't be as stressful as being, a doctor or a nurse or somebody on the front line somewhere. And so it's silly because there's plenty of other things that kind of apply to, how to run a business, how to, market your games and how to talk to your audience, the players. But I think this one kind of puts everything into perspective the most for me, and it kind of stuck with me. Just, you're not saving lives. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay if you weren't on time for that thing. It's okay that, the timing was shit because Nintendo shadow dropped a Nintendo Direct. It's not your fault. It's out of your control. But yeah, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that because honestly, I don't think we tell ourselves that enough. And we'll be in the moment. We might be reactive, and you're right. Like take that moment, take that breather, and be like, yeah, well, we're not saving lives. Okay, I get it. And well, I'm sorry, but on that note, then I'm like, well, what is your you don't have to answer, but like, what does your girlfriend say then when she's helping other people? And I'm sure they have some other like way to approach it, which is just as like meaningful and understanding and everything. But then I'm like, well, but what if she is no? So,
Well, you really have to be a special kind of breed of like person to do what they do. So I don't understand it fully. I can really appreciate, however, like what they do. But yeah, she does not ask me those questions. And essentially, when I come home and, in my mind, I've had a bad day because I didn't perform as well as I'd like, I'll open up with, "Hey, like I've had a bad day." And she kind of looks at me and says, "Yeah, I've had this happen." And then I'm kind of like, "Oh, wait, okay, my day is not bad."
yep.
Like, yeah,
Nope, I'm
whatever
good.
you just said is like tenfold just worse. So it's kind of like it's kind of a good thing. Not that she has bad days, just that it really just grounds me and puts everything back into perspective.
Awesome, love it. All right, next is, what was your childhood favorite game?
This one was the easiest one to answer. It's Paper Mario: A Thousand Year Door. And the reason for that is because I remember when I my dad bought us the GameCube. It was kind of like a really special moment. We had the Nintendo 64 in our household, and you kind of saw this evolution of console and then just this evolution of kind of the quality of games that come with it. And at the time, I think I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, and I think it's one of the first moments that I realized, and this is where, like, I got the bug to kind of, I this is where I started loving video games. But it's the moment for me that I started to realize that it's not just, like, colors and shapes, and there's, like, a story, and if I press buttons, eventually I'll get to the end. It's the first time I kind of understood that there's mechanics, even though I didn't know it was that's what the word was for those things. But I started discovering that, oh, it's like there's more to this. There's mechanics,
Mm.
and there's way to level your character, and there's things that you can add on to it, to upgrade, to make yourself stronger. And I kind of started connecting the dots there of like, okay, like there's a lot more work into this than I thought. And I think that's like where the appreciation came from, and that's where like the bug came from as well. And just like that game just was a pillar for that, for the console, sure, but I think just in general for Nintendo, a lot of people will name this game as one of their favorites just because it had absolutely everything, and the story was so compelling, and the characters were so like you know quirky and different, but like everyone, you wanted to use everyone differently or as
Yeah.
much as the other, and it was just like poignant to me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, thanks for sharing that too, because it's we all have that moment where we're like, oh, I see this now, and it's kind of cool that for you as part Paper Mario, and what made it so much more impactful for you. So cool. And last but not least, and the staple here on the show is what game are you playing now?
Well, after that, I've kind of discovered we got a PC in the house, and my brother was playing a lot of Diablo. He was playing a lot of Heroes of Might and Magic, and there were some other games that were available called first person shooters. So I went kind of down that route for a long time. So right now, my rotation is kind of like Hunt Showdown, Hell Let Loose, and then Rocket League, just to kind of like finish off my days. Just
Nice.
I'd say chill, but this game is getting sweatier and sweatier by the second. So.
I got to put new control grips and trigger grips on because I can't just keep sliding everywhere. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. And now that we have gone through the cue box round, folks, let's get into the heart of our discussion today, which is, as I shared in the intro, collaborative approaches to game marketing. And again, what better person to ask and have this conversation than with you because of Indie Asylum and the work that you guys do there and everything. So to kick things off, Kevin, from your perspective, what makes collaboration such a vital tool for indie developers? Because I'm sure we know this is important, but what makes it vital?
Yeah, that's a big one. I think we're in a time where there's like so much information out there, just like constantly moving and evolving, and the strategies are evolving, and the players' needs and desires are evolving, and it's really hard to follow all of that at the same time. So the fact that I work in a this collaborative hub. I called it ecosystem earlier, but you can call it a collaborative hub of video game studios that basically have come together to share the knowledge and resources, and kind of alleviate the growing pains of starting your own indie studios. But the Indie Asylum, what it does is it allows us to kind of cover more bases, cover multiple bases at once, and have this constant loop of contact between people to kind of, go over certain things that you're unsure of. And as an indie developer, you can start your own thing on your own, if that's what's important to you, to kind of prove to yourself that you can do it on your own. And by all means, we encourage people to do that, but we also encourage them to kind of look at the current situation that they're in, speaking about, talking about the current situation of the industry. And we asked them, do you think it'd be easier doing it with us? Do you think if we were able to help you out this way, and kind of grow together and help you become a better, not only like a businessman or woman, and build your business accordingly, but just like I said, alleviate the growing pains and not have to go down the same paths that we went down and that we learned from. We asked them that question, and I think it's an opportunity for a lot of indie devs right now, just because it's incredibly hard to start your own thing right now, as there's a lot of people doing it, and so funding is becoming more fierce, more competitive, and there's just a bunch of things that, like, if you were alone, it makes everything harder, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, if you have the opportunity to choose between doing something alone and having this kind of hard path in front of you, or doing something in a collaborative way that, yes, you'll still have to you know choose between different paths to avoid, mistakes or make those mistakes, then we just like, from my perspective, it's just the idea that like having that extra option, having the extra help and knowledge to me just makes sense. And I think a lot of indie developers should start looking into this kind of model where, they pool their resources and knowledge together and start their own thing.
Yeah, and you know what? I've been hearing, and I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I have been hearing a lot of interesting stories of developers and people doing that, pulling together their resources. And resources can be anything. It could be skills, it could expertise, it could even just be like bodies. Like, I mean, there's
Absolutely.
no there's no way of different, like there's just so many different ways in which people can come together. And I think the point that you made that stands out a lot. And I know sometimes for some people it's hard, like, oh well, networking or meeting new people is difficult. And I get it. It's whether how regardless of how outgoing or not you are, it can still be a challenge. But I think the point that you make that might maybe for some of us listening can drive us a little bit more is like not going it alone. Because even with all the resources and information and everything else out there, and you could have the playbook that will lead you to success. And even if that's the case, doing it alone is nowhere near as going to be as beneficial or quite as the same learning experience as it is, with others. And, like you said, there's moments you're going to have to do things your alone, make your own calls. I mean, but at the same time, it makes a world of a difference, as you already called out to.
Yeah, and I think, the absolute base version of that is like Discord groups or any type of group, with game devs that you're in on whatever social media or platform of preference. But like it starts there, and then just sharing through those groups, you can sort of learn at a faster rate and also get, different connections that you normally wouldn't have made if you were just trying to, do your own thing. And so, that's kind of the base version of it. And then if you want to upgrade to like a more physical version, then co-working spaces, that's kind of another idea there that, yes, we're sharing the same roof, but there's like a little advantage to it because, hey, there's also somebody under this roof that knows about the problem that I have. I should probably go talk to them about it and see what they have to say about it because maybe they've learned from it. Maybe they have like an opinion on it that could change your thinking towards it. So there's like different ways that, collaboration works as indie developers, and either, it can be online is what I'm saying, but we've kind of found this success in this physical model where, there's a version of it is like, yes, we are all under the same roof. So you could say it's a co-working, but what we're trying to do is add on to that. We don't just want to be a co-working space. We want to promote collaboration. We want to promote kind of sharing all that knowledge so that we can, go to the end point, which is, success in whatever form that is for you at a faster rate.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's what's funny, as you were saying that, I was thinking for a moment, I'll ask you real quick. Do you know how we eventually like what the connection was that finally got us to meet? I mean, we Antoine and folks, for those of that name that sounds familiar, Antoine was on the show twice before. Clearly it was Antoine because you used to work with him, but before that, do you have any idea?
I don't know. I
Okay.
actually don't know.
So I had to take a moment and think, and what it came down to, and the reason why I'm sharing this is it goes right back to what you're talking about, this idea of collaboration, sharing information and such. The reason how I eventually got connected to you through Anton was because what is it? Chasing Rats, Alexis, forget his last name.
Yes,
Uh,
Galavigno.
yeah, you guys had like a Wednesday meetup where everybody in the asylum was like, "Hey, we're finding marketing stuff or whatever, and here's what I found and shared." And with and one of the things I think Alexis found, I think it was him. Yeah, I believe it was him. It happened to be one of my articles I wrote, and then from that, that's how I basically got to know Purple Israel and everything
Yeah,
else.
that's right. That's right. We do it in a different form now, but we used to have kind of a between, marketing heads of the Indie Asylum. Every Wednesday, we'd kind of like share something that we
Yeah,
just
yeah.
discovered, and yeah, that's right. Oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah.
But it's and the reason I share that, folks, is because it's kinda crazy of, like, this idea, this concept of collaboration and sharing this information. I mean, while this is, like, probably small peanuts to the things we all wanna work towards and everything, but the whole reason why we're having this conversation today is because of this simple, basic concept. And And I'm not even going to go into all the other things that probably have and did come out of this relationship just from sharing something. So, and that's just in this particular case. We have no idea of what other extent this has happened for everybody in that community and stuff. So now we got some ideas there too, but I want to kind of discuss this collaborative nature and everything else. I mean, what would you say are, some key advantages of, let's say, either, marketing through a collaborative or, a community driven hub?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, you learn from mistakes faster than most would. So I guess to kind of drive it towards like a marketing perspective, it's adaptability. I think what's really, really cool is that anytime I have, a strategy that I want to turn into, something that's concrete and actionable and that I can, run on whatever platform I'm trying to run it on, I have the opportunity to kind of ask around first in the Indie Asylum to be like, hey, has anybody been in this situation to do, XYZ? And I'll always have a ping. Somebody will always say, hey, like I did that, last year, I did that 6 months ago, I did that 4 months ago. Here's the data. Here's my personal feeling. Here's my professional feeling on it. So I get these different angles. And sometimes, it's not just one person. Sometimes it's like three, four different people coming at you with, different answers, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And yeah, it can be like it could add on to the, you could get more questions than answers from it, but I think it's a good thing. You want to make your decisions with the most amount of information and not just gut feeling. And so I think that's like one of the quirks, the opportunities that we have is just like I can adapt super quickly just by asking that question. I was going to go left, but after talking to people and asking that question, I'm actually going to go right. And turns out going right was the right path just because of that kind of that check-in, we'll say. That's definitely one way of doing it. I think another way of doing it too is just when you activate that thing, whatever form it is, it could be a campaign and, an ad campaign, or it could be whatever it is. You can have multiple people kind of looking at it. So it's there's never a moment where it's kind of left alone, even though you have a lot to do. There's always somebody else kind of covering for you or, letting you know, hey, you should check it out. Like there's been, a change in the way that you're trying to show this to players. Maybe there's a way that we can, adapt to it, blah, blah, blah. So I think just immediately what comes to mind is just how quick you can adapt to different situations just by having multiple voices at the table.
Yeah, and you know what? Those I find that those voices can be pretty powerful too, especially when you're all coming together. Like some things that I'm thinking of, and just because our relationship, we chat regularly and everything. Like I remember, what was it? And correct me if I'm wrong in terms of if this still aligns with our conversation stuff. But you guys did a showcase not too long ago, and if I believe that was kind of like part of like a collaborative effort with other members in the community, correct? And it was just another way to kind of get the name out a bit more for all these types of titles. It was like kind of a group effort, putting it together. Like everybody kind of had the role, so to speak, to a degree.
Yeah, I think, man, I think it was like almost 3 years ago already now, but yeah, it's crazy. But I think it came from this idea of just like there was like a moment in the industry where like a bunch of indies were kind of figuring out that like why do we have to fight for the like 5 game showcases that exist? Like I have a camera, I have a phone camera, like I can do this. I can just shoot my own thing. And we kind of pitched the idea internally to say like, hey, like would you be interested if we did this sort of thing? And we pitched the idea to the different CEOs and the different people from the different studios in the Indie Asylum. We gave them like a base storyboard, and everybody was immediately in. Like it goes into our kind of philosophy of learning ourselves and then mastering it. But yeah, we had the Asylum Direct, and the idea was we'll just showcase our games, the ones that are coming out, the ones that are currently in development. And it was less of a kind of, the idea wasn't to have all of these people kind of know who we are, even though that was kind of a fun effect it had. But I think it was more about making a statement to show internally, hey, we have the proficiency, like we have the knowledge and the skills to do this sort of thing. So if ever we want to do another one now, you can bet on us that, we'll bring that type of quality. So it was cool. It was a really cool thing that we did, and it turned out great.
Yeah, and I love that too because and folks, if we really think about it, this isn't so much different than other things like putting together a Steam showcase, right? I mean, there's some work involved, but
Mhm.
that's one way of doing that within your fellow community members of whatever of certain genre of games or a Discord or whatever. And I think on a different note too, even a more commercial side is what we've seen at least its introduction last year was a AAA showcase, all right? I
Mhm.
mean,
Yep.
so lots of different things. I mean, yeah, we're just talking about showcases top of mind, but I mean, there's just so many different ways that we can kind of pool together our resources, these shared resources, and really leverage them.
Yeah, I think, for us it was kind of an obvious decision just because Purple's Royal had this specialty in creating video content. We have a video department. I was one of the first people to be in that department first, and it kind of, grew from there. But now we have an amazing team, Marjo and Daphne, who are doing a great job, working on our trailers, everything that we put out on social media, and even the ads that we create, or like internally, we have a lot of like videos to kind of show, the different events that we have. But it was just obvious to us that like we'd make a video just because we feel really, competent in that kind of domain. And yeah, it kind of like it was surprising as well, just because we knew we could do it. We didn't know what shape it would come in, but the end product was surprising in a good way, because we didn't think it'd come out like that well. And now we know, if ever we do another one, hint hint, wink wink, we know what to do and what to avoid. So it was kind of like the obvious choice for us to go down that path.
Sweet. You know, in light of all this, I mean, we talked about some examples that can, you know, like we just demonstrated, really enhance visibility. Like for indie games, especially if we come together in force, right? But in light of that too, like I'm sure there's potential pitfalls or challenges that can be faced even for collaborative hubs, and those things need to be addressed. So, like, what do you think those potential pitfalls are or challenges? Because I mean, I'm sure these are all things we would love to be aware and learn about. So if this is an idea or concept that some of us don't want to be on board with, well, they want to learn not to make those mistakes either.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the most important things, is to learn is just to be aware of what you're not doing well or what you're not good at. For us at the beginning, and still, this is in constant evolution. We're still working on it, but communication has to be by far, in a collaborative hub, the most important thing. You cannot have people working in silos. It's just a direct negative impact on everything that you're doing if we're not sharing, if we're not talking to each other, if we're not letting each other know, what to avoid, or what's coming up and what to do. Early on, when, the Indie Asylum was kind of coming to grips around 2018, that was our biggest thing. I think there was this excitement that like, hey, like I think we this model that we're trying to introduce, I think it's really cool, and you can see it kind of grow from the ground up. But early on, I'd say one of the challenges was just that. I think everyone wanted to perform at such a high level just because it was like new and exciting, that most of the times we forgot to do one of the most basic things, which is, just check in with each other and see where we're going, and how we're doing the things that we're doing. And so that's like top of my mind. Just it comes immediately because, as I said, we're still working on that. We're definitely better than what we were before. It's evolved at such a fast rate, but we're still working on that. Communication has to be the most important thing if you work in a collaborative hub. It's in the name, it's in the nature of collaboration, is letting others know what's up, and what we can all do better together.
Yeah, and I can't agree more. I mean, that's one of like core foundations for stuff is like communication and clarity, which is all part of it. Messaging, right? How many times have I said those words before? But
Yeah,
like,
and you would know, like, when you're working with a client, and, you send a message, once every 2 weeks, it's worrisome. Like, I don't want that frequency of messaging unless I ask for it, or, we've determined that that's the appropriate amount of time. But I think the idea is to kind of give me an update in a regular fashion of like, "Hey, like, I know you gave me an idea, but here's what I'm actually doing, on a day by day basis, and here's the stats or the data that's coming out of it." You would know.
Yeah, and it's so diverse too. Like communication is so encompassing of, listening, clarity, frequency, cadence, like all these other things that we typically don't think about. But it's always I find like I don't know, I don't really think about it too much, but I know that I would say if there's gonna be a pitfall or something falling between the cracks, more likely than not, you can always associate it to communication somehow, some way, period. So, what does that tell you? If there's anything you could do to improve upon it, it's going to work out well. And to the point of what you said about silos, yeah, man. In my agency days, I loved it when I was running ad campaigns, and then we might be having a campaign that we might get a couple of conversions here and there and stuff, right? But meanwhile, and the other department updated the website and ripped all the code off. So now we don't know if we have any conversions. And it could be weeks before we're like,
Oh god.
typically we would have gotten one by now. And then later they're like, oh, yeah, we updated the site and we probably just stripped the code. And okay.
Terrible.
It's like, whatever. But silos, like, don't have them. And I don't know, because in the way I feel too is just even if the departments don't relate in any shape or form, or you don't feel that they do, chances are there's some connecting thread that can, and it's just going to make things better for marketing, going to make things better for development, etc. So
Absolutely.
great point there. And I mean, that's how we keep things going, right? So in light of all this, I mean, I want to, I want to, with the time that we have left, go into, some concepts and discussion around, building strong marketing strategies, because let's face it, with all that you've been involved in the rest of your community, I'm sure lots of cool things bubble up, and you guys can get really creative sometimes, and but not to say like we're being super unique, because I'm sure you understand the value of not overcomplicating things either.
Absolutely, yeah. But like I said earlier, we've got the opportunity to kind of experiment on things, but that doesn't mean that we go full, experimental on different campaigns.
Yeah, totally. So in this case, then I'm curious, like, because I'm sure this is something that some of us struggle with too. Like, how would you say that developers can balance their creative vision with strategic marketing needs, especially in today's competitive market?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think how indie developers can balance their creative vision with strategic marketing needs. I think, there's a distinction there, and it kind of ties into the whole communication part of that, but like that's the first step. The first step is making sure that that pipeline exists between developers and marketing, and also making sure that marketing, has a clear understanding of what the developer is trying to say with what they're doing.
Mm,
And then moving from that, I would say one of the most important things as well would be to just shifting your focus on understanding your audience as early as you can. Again, this is just speaking of like from kind of where I'm coming from right now, and coming to grips with. But I think having like this structured approach into understanding your audience as early as possible will inform everything else. And it's something that, we've done well for certain things, and it's something that we've done, really poorly for others. And every time we do postmortems, I think that the number one thing that is always coming out is just that, right? It's like we know what the game is about. We knew what the fantasy of the game is, and kind of, the unique selling points of it. But who is it actually for? Like, who are we talking to when we're trying to communicate that trailer, when we're trying to communicate these, this campaign? I think that would be like the number one thing for me, just off the top of my head. I think another one would be kind of, man. there's so many things to pick from, and I'm just
There
trying to
is.
like going in my just my personal experience. But I think what's something that's worked for us a lot as well is being kind of flexible and like really quick with feedback. Again, like having that sort of pipeline that exists between developers and the marketing team, and then between the marketing team and the actual players. Just being quick with feedback and being able to iterate on that is something I think would be important at the beginning as well, and one of the ways that you can kind of balance that out.
Yeah, and I like that last one too because as you were saying, I was kind of envisioning something like this type of a scenario where, let's say, someone from development they were able to get a screen grab or something, right? And then they shoot it off to someone in marketing, or maybe it's the same person, who knows, right? And then you put it out there, and you're like, oh, whether it's social media posts, whether anything, just it's out there. And then you're like, oh, people are saying this, but that is not what that is, or not the impression, or X, Y, or Z other thing that is not aligned with what you understand it to be.
Yeah,
So right, and then in that whole sequence there, we now realize, oh, well, we are not communicating something correctly here.
yeah, the number one question, you should have when that happens, for example, is, what did they not understand? What
Mm,
what did I do that confused them? Because it's not their fault. It's not that they don't get it. It's because I didn't tap into the most optimal route of, showing you the thing, explaining the thing to you so that you would understand and kind of grab, the I didn't grab your attention in the right way. So I think it's the creative vision that comes from the developers. It's some of their like marketing just serves to amplify that and
yeah.
not kind of dissuade from what it is at the base. But it's still my job to make sure that from the top, I'm a facilitator and I'm able to make the player understand what I understood from the developer. So just having that pipeline and making sure that it's clear and concise is extremely important.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to your points why silos aren't good, because if no one's talking between these two things, then we're never going to make the connection that, like, oh, something needs to change.
Yeah, don't ask yourself why there's a problem, right?
Yeah, because I mean, you might drive yourself crazy sometimes, which I know. So good points there, and let's dive into this a little bit more because you brought out something interesting about knowing your audience and that being kind of the the key stance really to effectively communicate, to develop these strategies. Because if we're just leading with our own intentions, our vision, and everything else that's us, and not caring about anything else, that's where we can have some of these disconnects, at least the external ones with the audiences. So to kind of close here today, or right before we close, how would you say, how important is it for developers to understand their audience's behavior when crafting marketing campaigns? And folks, when I'm saying the term campaigns, it's anything marketing activity related. But how do you think that, how important is it for developers to really understand their audience's behavior?
Yeah, I think it's obviously very important. I think again, just speaking from, where I'm standing as an indie game, marketing agency, I have a limited budget. So I don't get tons of chances. I don't get that many, at bats for you American folk out there. I don't it's okay to make a mistake, once or twice in a span of, a couple months, but I have to nail it from the get-go or have to be damn sure to nail it the second time because I just won't be able to communicate it effectively if I miss out in the first few tries. So, from where I'm standing with that limited budget, it's super important, but I think if you do it correctly, if you know who you're talking to, if you know how they would act and react and understand the game that you're presenting, whatever works, whatever format works best. And this is something that I've learned with Checkmate Showdown was that there was a version of, and again, just because our specialty is video content, and at the time, pushing that on TikTok, let's say, there was always really really good responses. there was a point where we just made the same video, not the same type of content, but kind of the same structure of like, intro content of the game and then leave with a question, for example. We just iterated on that back to back to back. And every time it was a huge kind of response every single time. And I don't think it's just because, it's TikTok. We had that random, viral algorithm that came and picked us up. I think it's just because we found who we were talking to, which is the FGC, the fighting game community, and realize that, okay, they crave video and they crave what type of video. Here's the content that they crave in those videos. And then the way I would present it would be from, scouring different platforms on TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it was, and basically saying, look, like all these videos are in the same format, and every time they get this crazy high engagement. So it's super important to know how they would react to a certain thing that you're trying to show them, because you're not trying to mimic, but at the same time you are trying to get the most engagement out of it, the most positive engagement out of it. And that starts with understanding who they are and where they hang out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so many great points there too, because let's face it, folks. I mean, there's processes, ways, and everything to really dial in and get a lot of behavior. But to be honest, like not all of us, let's say, have the time or the resources or even the funds to acquire some of these things that can maybe provide a little bit more of these insights. But in those moments, there's still things that you can do to validate. And Kevin, you just provided a great example of that. And another one that popped in my head as you were saying that was, Strafon Studio, Philomena Schwab with the Wandering Village and her team. They had this hook and they kept pitching it in terms of like putting it out there, and they found out what resonated really well, and they lots of iterations and stuff, but but again, similar results to what you were seeing in different platforms. And through that, when I worked with them on their ads campaign, again, it was another iterative process, but we distilled it, we refined it, and then we're like, well, let's now push a little further, let's test it a little further. And even Simon Carlos from Game Discover Co. in his article covered one of his blog posts covered Strafon and called out to the same exact thing. So it's not unique, it's not like overcomplicated or complex. It's simply just like pushing those things out, just those little things, and working with what you got. And as you called out, and as we see with some other examples, these things can happen even when budgets are tight and resources are limited. So
Absolutely. That's a great example too. I think she's like one of the leaders of, just having effective campaigns. Is by all means, it's not that everything she puts out is so, unique and special, never been seen before. It's just she looks at what works and she brings her own sauce, which is whatever game that she's working on. And then it's just trial and error. And at some point, it's more like good than bad. It's more a positive impact than negative impact. And you're not reinventing the wheel. I think there's this pressure of like it has to be absolutely special every single time. And by all means, if you have the budget for it, go for it. But in a more like efficient matter, or trying to optimize how you're doing things because you have to optimize your time and money, it's just seeing what works best, not necessarily what works, what's the most unique thing you can do.
yeah, right. And exactly. So such a great point. Well, I know we're coming on time here, and man, we talked quite a bit. It's been a great conversation. But before we part, first, based on what we talked about, are there any like tips, suggestions that you would like to share with our listeners today, based off of what we chatted about?
Yeah, I think for this was an easier one just because I looked back at what I think I would have liked to know ahead of time going into games marketing, but the number one thing would be just to find your tools early on, just because they'll save you a bunch of time, and they'll give you these habits of checking into them regularly and being able to like master these tools. And by tools, I don't mean necessarily paid tools. I just mean like find kind of your routine for which tools you use for which type of campaign, just because I'm big on optimizing my use of time. And so that's number one. That's the advice I would give. And then another thing would be, I think I'm speaking more to newer people in games marketing, the whether you're coming out of university or just trying something different. But if you think something is a good idea, it's because it probably is. So don't be shy or scared to share why you think you should be going in a certain direction with, specific campaigns. I think the worst thing you could do is ask zero questions, and you should never be scared of being the dumbest person at the table, because at the end of the day, you're trying to learn and you're trying to actually do better every time, or at least I hope so. So I chances are, if you think it's a good idea, it's because it is. So speak up, ask questions. How can we do it this way? Those would be like my main ones.
Yeah, and that's a good one too. In any kind, because it's like, what was it? It reminded me of a moment. We were actually at this roundtable together. It was with Steam, where I asked a question about how Steam features some stuff, and it was with one of the main Steam representatives, and people in the room were like it was like, oh well, you clearly it's this, and I was like, I felt kind of dumb in the moment, but it was funny because it was just simply a misunderstanding. But then the rep there quickly understood, oh, maybe we need to clarify that, because immediately he knew how that could be misinterpreted. And I what is it specifically? Was like the upcoming or new released, because of how it released on there. It made it the implication that, hey, I'm at the top of the list, and they're like, oh,
Right.
we need to communicate this differently, because I think
Yeah.
still to this day a lot of people are like, hey, look, I got here. It's like, it's not what you think, but it's good. It's just not what you think. Like,
Yeah, and they were quick to fix that. You got to give credit where credit is due. Steam, there is minor. There are some shady things, but at the same time, they're very good at doing just that, on iterating. Was this understood correctly? Did we is the messaging correct for the specific things? And I think they're doing a great job. It's funny because I mean it's mostly marketers, people in games marketing that will ask those questions
mm,
about like how Steam works, but Steam's doing a good job in communicating, hey, like
yeah.
that wasn't the intention of this feature. It was actually that's what we were trying to do. And they have like these videos now, even that they're releasing like before Next Fest, where people can ask their questions, and so it's really cool. They've been doing a good job about that.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and the reason why I called out to that is because, yeah, that was kind of a humbling moment for me. But I mean, like kind of what you've been saying all this time and what you just said,
You
like,
got to ask the
say it,
question.
just ask the question, say it, because doing that potentially probably helped thousands of people, not that
Yeah,
at my expense, which that, and I obviously I can't take whole credit for that, but just in that moment, it's just, that's good, because even if you have those humbling moments and stuff, and they're gonna happen, but it's all for the good. And that's just one example of, hey, if you think it's a good idea, if you think it's worth asking, if you really want to know and you're a little embarrassed, just ask.
yeah, and I also think, like, you say humbling moment, but at the same time, you're not supposed to know everything.
Yeah,
Like,
you can't, you
you
can't.
you can't. You'll learn as you go, and if something doesn't stick, write it down somewhere, write it down on a Post-it
Yeah,
note so that every day you're reminded, but, like, your brain doesn't work that way.
yeah.
You're not supposed to know everything at
Like,
once.
how, I mean, it just one more quick comment. Like, folks, how do you think my friend in, geez, what was it? When I was in middle school, I found out that in like eighth grade, a very good friend of mine had no clue what a Twinkie was. Like that's pretty embarrassing. I'll have to share him with that. Like, by the way, I called out to you, man, that you didn't know what a Twinkie was in eighth grade. I mean, I think they're pretty universal. So, I'm sure they have Twinkies all over the world, I would assume. You're laughing. You know what a Twinkie is.
I know what it is, I know what it
Okay,
is.
okay. Anyways, point being, it's okay. All right. I know we're on time, but hey, you have something really cool coming up. And I think by the time this airs in a month, what is it? Please share.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So I think for the like sixth or seventh or maybe eighth year, I'm actually not quite sure. I want to say sixth year in a row, we're running the Quebec Game Celebration on Steam. So it's a festival where we're regrouping, every developer in Quebec, one of the top gaming hubs in the world, actually. And essentially, we're doing this Steam event that'll have front page visibility through February 17th to the 24th, and you'll be able to kind of get these amazing games at a really really sick price. You'll even be able to see upcoming games, so you'll be able to fill up your wish list cart there. But yeah, this is the biggest regional sale on Steam, confirmed by Steam, and already this year there are over 200 games submitted. So yeah, February 17th to the 24th, if you want to support us, if you want to show some love, if you want to be surprised at how many, games that you love and that you've enjoyed over the years are actually made here. Check that out. It'll be on Steam.
Awesome. Excellent. And Kevin, for anybody who's listened to you today and would love to touch base, reach out, or learn more about Purple as Royale, what are some links you could drop?
Yeah, well, you can reach out at my email, which is kevin@purplesroyal.com. You can check us out on our website, purplesroyal.com. Even if the Indie Asylum was something that was speaking to you, pretty simple as well, indieasylum.com. And follow me on socials. I don't always post hot takes. I try to post, smart things mostly. Sometimes there's hockey in there. I'm from Canada. You have to go along with it. But yeah, that'll be at indie_KC if you want to follow me.
Sweet. Well, Kevin, thanks a lot. Appreciate you and having this conversation. Folks, show notes. We'll have all those links. Kevin, awesome for having you here. Appreciate you and keep kicking butt, man. It's great having you on the show.
Same to you, Andrew. Thanks for having me. You're awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. Love these podcasts, man.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.